Self-respect is the cornerstone of influence and attraction because it communicates value without words. When a woman respects herself, she establishes a standard that others recognize instinctively. She does not need to demand attention, seek approval, or over-explain her needs. Her energy, her boundaries, and her presence convey her worth clearly and consistently. Self-respect creates an invisible framework within which interactions occur, signaling that her time, energy, and emotional investment are not disposable commodities. This framework commands attention because it is grounded in internal authority, not external validation. The way self-respect manifests is subtle yet powerful. It shows in how she carries herself, how she speaks, and how she responds to others. Eye contact is steady, not nervous or pleading. Speech is deliberate, not apologetic or overly accommodating. Gestures and behavior communicate that she is grounded, confident, and present in her own life. A man notices these signals immediately because they indicate stability, emotional maturity, and self-awareness. When someone knows their value and demonstrates it through consistent behavior, they naturally elicit respect without having to force it. Self-respect also creates boundaries that are clear and non-negotiable. Boundaries are not arbitrary rules. They are commitments to uphold one's own standards and emotional well-being. A woman with self-respect does not tolerate disrespect, dismissiveness, or inconsistency. She communicates limits calmly and enforces them without drama. This enforcement signals that she will not allow others to dictate her value or manipulate her emotions. When boundaries are clear, others understand what behavior is acceptable and what is not, and respect follows because accountability is enforced naturally. Understanding the difference between ego and self-respect is crucial. Ego demands attention, reacts defensively to criticism, and seeks validation. Self-respect operates independently of external approval. It is calm, deliberate, and rooted in internal understanding of one's worth. Men respond to self-respect because it demonstrates emotional stability and maturity. When a woman's sense of self is independent of his validation, it changes the dynamic. She is no longer performing for approval. She is living authentically. That authenticity creates magnetic presence, naturally attracting respect and admiration. Self-respect influences the way a woman responds to challenges and setbacks. She does not overact to minor slights, misunderstandings, or moments of tension. She addresses issues directly and calmly, maintaining composure and clarity. This approach communicates strength because it shows that her emotional state is not dictated by someone else's behavior. Emotional stability under pressure is a trait that commands respect because it demonstrates resilience, discipline, and the capacity to navigate relationships without chaos. Consistency is another dimension of self-respect. A woman who respects herself aligns her actions with her words, ensuring that her behavior is predictable in a healthy way. She does not promise and fail to follow through, nor does she compromise principles to maintain temporary peace. This consistency allows others to trust her, to rely on her judgment, and to recognize that she is accountable not only to herself but also to the integrity of her interactions. Men notice consistency because it creates a stable environment in which respect can flourish. Self-respect also affects social dynamics and decision-making. She does not overextend herself to gain approval or affection. She evaluates whether relationships and interactions align with her standards, and she invests accordingly. Effort is proportional to value, not driven by fear of loss or desperation for attention. This discernment ensures that she is not manipulated or exploited, and it communicates clearly that access to her time and energy is earned, not taken for granted. The clarity of these standards inspires respect because they demonstrate discernment, integrity, and self-awareness. Her reaction to rejection and setbacks further reinforces self-respect. She does not plead, manipulate, or compromise her values to retain someone's interest. Instead, she accepts outcomes with composure, maintaining dignity and self-worth. This behavior signals that her identity and value are independent of external validation. Men recognize this independence as strength because it communicates that connection is a mutual choice, not a one-sided pursuit. Respect arises naturally in response to this level of self-possession. Ultimately, self-respect is visible in every choice, action, and boundary a woman establishes. It is not performative or superficial. It is deeply rooted in self-understanding and integrity. Men respect what they cannot take for granted, what exists with authority and consistency. When a woman operates from self-respect, she does not need to demand respect. It emerges naturally as a response to the clarity, stability, and internal power she embodies. Self-respect is the foundation upon which attraction, influence, and authentic connection are built, and it is the one trait that ensures men cannot help but notice, value, and honor her presence. When a man sends mixed signals, it is not your responsibility to interpret them. His inconsistency, his warm attention one moment and distant behavior the next, is a reflection of his own uncertainty, not a measure of your worth. Yet many women take it upon themselves to decode every message, analyze every pause, and rationalize every change in behavior, believing that understanding the reason behind his actions will restore stability. That belief is both exhausting and misleading. Mixed signals are a symptom of his clarity or lack thereof, and the responsibility to resolve them rests entirely with him. You cannot manufacture certainty by overthinking or by filling in the gaps with hope. The instinct to translate inconsistency often comes from fear. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, or fear of being alone drives you to seek explanations that preserve connection. You convince yourself that if you understand his motives, his behavior will make sense and the uncertainty will disappear. But clarity cannot be created through imagination or over-analysis. Consistency, transparency, and aligned actions are what generate certainty. When his words and actions do not align, that misalignment is the message. You are entitled to acknowledge it without trying to reinterpret it or soften it. Responsibility for clarity begins with honesty. A man who is ready and committed communicates openly, prioritizes your time, and aligns his behavior with his intentions. If he is uncertain, he communicates his uncertainty. If he is not ready, he communicates that boundary. Mixed signals often emerge when a man avoids accountability for his own emotions or fears. By attempting to translate ambiguity, you assume responsibility for his clarity, taking on emotional labor that is not yours. This labor creates anxiety, self-doubt, and overinvestment because you are trying to manufacture alignment where none exists. When you stop translating confusion, you begin observing patterns instead of isolated incidents. A single late response may be inconsequential. Repeated delays, inconsistent attention, or canceled plans, however, form a clear pattern of behavior. Patterns are the evidence you need to evaluate alignment. They show whether his words are reliable, whether his intentions are consistent, and whether his presence can be trusted. Hope and imagination cannot replace observable patterns. Recognizing these patterns allows you to make decisions based on reality rather than speculation. Emotional intuition is a critical guide in navigating mixed signals. Your nervous system detects inconsistency before your mind does. Anxiety, tension, or unease are signals that the dynamic lacks stability. Translating confusion often involves ignoring or rationalizing these internal cues. Convincing yourself that things will improve if you try harder or understand better. Honoring clarity requires listening to these instincts without dismissing them. Your feelings are data, not drama, and they provide insight into whether behavior aligns with your needs. Boundaries are the natural outcome of acknowledging who is responsible for clarity. When repeated patterns of inconsistency are observed, boundaries protect your emotional well-being. You do not need to chase explanations, overcompensate for absence, or tolerate disrespect. Boundaries do not punish, they create structure. They communicate standards and enforce accountability. When clarity is lacking, your response must reflect that absence. Calm, consistent enforcement of boundaries preserves self-respect and reduces emotional exhaustion. Understanding mixed signals also prevents self-blame. Women often internalize inconsistent behavior, asking if they caused it, misread it, or were somehow inadequate. In reality, the source of uncertainty lies entirely with the person creating it. Mixed signals are not evidence of your failure, they are evidence of his hesitation. Recognizing this distinction prevents the erosion of confidence and reinforces emotional autonomy. You can empathize with his fears or struggles while still refusing to accept consequences that compromise your standards. Patience is not the same as tolerance. Patience allows space for consistent behavior to emerge when evidence supports it. Tolerance, however, often disguises denial, prolonging investment in a connection that fails to provide alignment. Translating confusion frequently crosses into tolerance, normalizing inconsistency and eroding self-respect. By honoring clarity, you maintain standards and protect energy while allowing for genuine alignment to manifest if it exists. Clarity, transparency, and aligned action are non-negotiable foundations of connection. Words alone do not create trust. Action reinforces intention. You are not obligated to translate ambiguity, guess motives, or rationalize indecision. The responsibility for clarity always belongs to the person creating uncertainty. By observing patterns, trusting instincts, and enforcing boundaries, you reclaim power, maintain self-respect, and preserve energy for relationships where alignment, consistency, and accountability are present. Recognizing that mixed signals reflect his internal state rather than your value restores control, reduces emotional strain, and establishes a dynamic in which only clarity earns investment. Understanding a man's mixed signals requires separating empathy from tolerance. Many women interpret his inconsistency as a reflection of their worth, questioning whether they are too much, too little, or not enough. They replay conversations in their minds, overanalyze delayed responses, and rationalize conflicting behavior, believing that insight into his motives can resolve uncertainty. Yet understanding someone's internal struggle does not obligate you to accept behavior that destabilizes your emotional state. Empathy allows perspective, but it does not erase the consequences of his indecision. Recognizing this distinction is essential because it enables you to navigate the relationship with clarity, authority, and self-respect. respect. Mixed signals often stem from internal conflict within the man himself. One part of him may desire connection, intimacy, and commitment, while another part resists vulnerability, fears rejection, or questions his readiness. That internal tension manifests externally as inconsistency. He may be warm and attentive one day, distant and withdrawn the next. He may make plans and then cancel them, express affection and then pull back. Observing these behaviors objectively allows you to recognize the source of the signals without personalizing them. His hesitation reflects his internal process, not your value or desirability. Understanding that it is about him, not you, is critical to maintaining confidence and emotional equilibrium. Empathy can provide insight into why he behaves inconsistently, but it should not replace boundaries. Recognizing his fears, past experiences, or doubts can foster compassion, yet the effect of his actions on you remains real and unavoidable. Distance, unpredictability, and inconsistent attention generate stress and anxiety regardless of intention. You are entitled to stability, clarity, and respect, and understanding his motives does not eliminate the impact of his choices. Empathy informs perspective, but it does not neutralize consequences or justify compromise of your standards. Tolerance of mixed signals is often disguised as patience, but it is fundamentally different from informed observation. When you attempt to decode ambiguity, you invest energy into maintaining hope rather than evaluating evidence. Rationalizing inconsistent behavior leads to normalization, where actions that should be unacceptable become tolerable. You adjust expectations downward, overcompensate emotionally, and inadvertently reinforce patterns of indecision. Understanding mixed signals without clear boundaries allows hope to mask reality and desire to override standards, creating a dynamic where your emotional labor supports someone else's uncertainty. Boundaries are essential for translating empathy into empowered action. When you observe patterns of inconsistency, enforcing limits protects your emotional well-being and communicates your standards without drama or confrontation. Calmly requiring transparency, consistency, and follow-through ensures that your energy is respected and that your engagement is earned rather than assumed. Boundaries are not punitive. They create a framework in which alignment can be observed and evaluated. They allow you to respond to mixed signals without taking responsibility for someone else's internal conflicts. Understanding also prevents self-blame. Many women internalize inconsistent behavior, asking whether they provoked it, misread it, or are somehow inadequate. Mixed signals originate with the person exhibiting them, not with the one interpreting them. By recognizing this, you maintain confidence and authority over your emotional state. You can empathize with his internal struggle without accepting consequences that compromise your self-respect. Emotional awareness combined with discernment allows you to distinguish between temporary hesitation and chronic indecision, creating a foundation for informed choices. Emotional intuition plays a crucial role in interpreting signals accurately. Anxiety, discomfort, or unease are indicators that behavior lacks alignment with your needs. Translating ambiguity often overrides these cues. Replacing instinct with hope or rationalization, honoring your internal signals ensures that understanding remains a tool for awareness rather than an excuse for compromise. When you trust your instincts and observe patterns objectively, you can maintain composure while evaluating whether engagement serves your emotional stability or undermines it. Patience is an informed response. Tolerance is self-compromise. Allowing space for consistency to emerge is different from endlessly accommodating uncertainty. Mixed signals provide evidence of alignment or misalignment over time. By understanding the internal conflict behind behavior without tolerating its consequences, you preserve emotional energy and self-respect. This approach enables you to respond from clarity rather than fear, desire, or hope. Insight becomes a mechanism for empowerment, not for overinvestment. Ultimately, understanding mixed signals equips you to navigate relationships intelligently. It allows empathy without acquiescence, awareness without overcompensation, and perspective without compromise. You can recognize why he hesitates, why he retreats, and why his attention fluctuates while simultaneously enforcing standards that protect your well-being. Mixed signals reflect his internal process, not your worth, and acknowledging this truth restores control. By observing patterns, trusting instincts, and maintaining boundaries, you transform insight into power, allowing you to engage only in relationships that demonstrate alignment, consistency, and accountability. When a man is truly ready, his behavior eliminates uncertainty. Readiness is not shown through dramatic gestures, occasional attention, or intermittent intensity. It is demonstrated through alignment. His words, actions, and intentions consistently match. You do not have to guess, interpret, or rationalize because the consistency is self-evident. His presence becomes a source of stability rather than stress. Emotional reliability replaces doubt, and trust replaces anxiety. When someone is ready, their engagement is deliberate, predictable, and sustained, creating a dynamic in which connection can flourish without manipulation or overanalysis. Consistency is the clearest sign of readiness. If he promises time together, he shows up. If he makes plans, he honors them. If he expresses affection, it is reinforced by supporting actions. There are no warm and cold swings, no sudden disappearances, no mixed signals to decode. Predictability is not boring, it is empowering. It allows you to invest without second guessing, to trust without fear, and to participate in a relationship where intentions are clear. That steadiness communicates seriousness, emotional maturity, and respect, creating space for connection built on certainty rather than hope or speculation. A man who is ready demonstrates emotional availability. He does not withdraw from important conversations or shy away from vulnerability. He engages with honesty and consistency, showing that he values connection over comfort. Emotional availability allows intimacy to develop because he is present both physically and mentally. He can navigate difficult conversations without defensiveness or avoidance, signaling that he is capable of sustaining a healthy dynamic even under tension. Emotional maturity generates respect, admiration, and trust because it reflects control, stability, and reliability. Prioritization is another indicator of readiness. A man who is prepared to invest in a meaningful connection integrates you into his life naturally. He does not make you compete for attention, affection, or time. Inclusion is intentional rather than convenient. You feel chosen because his actions consistently reflect commitment, and you no longer have to negotiate for acknowledgement. When prioritization aligns with consistency, you experience the security of being genuinely valued. You can invest emotionally without fear, knowing that his behavior reflects deliberate choice rather than whim or obligation. Trust forms when words and actions are aligned. Promises alone do not build confidence. Repeated demonstration of reliability does. Readiness ensures that intentions can be verified through consistent behavior. You no longer question whether his feelings are genuine because they are mirrored in his daily decisions, patterns of effort, and responsiveness. Trust replaces doubt, clarity replaces ambiguity, and engagement is grounded in evidence rather than hope. Stability becomes the foundation upon which connection grows. Readiness is also evident in the way challenges are handled. A man who is capable of commitment does not retreat under pressure or conflict. He remains present, listens actively, and responds thoughtfully. He does not allow personal discomfort, stress, or external pressures to undermine connection. Resilience in difficult situations demonstrates seriousness and earns implicit respect, showing that the relationship is a priority even when circumstances are not ideal. This steadfastness reinforces security and allows mutual investment to deepen. Peace is a natural outcome of readiness. You no longer experience anxiety over unpredictability, nor are you compelled to chase attention. The rhythm of the relationship becomes steady, providing emotional energy for growth and intimacy instead of constant interpretation of behavior. The absence of drama does not equate to absence of passion. Rather, it allows space for genuine connection where attraction can evolve into trust and respect. Readiness provides the structure for a relationship to thrive without chaos. Authenticity flourishes in the presence of readiness. When a man's words, actions, and priorities align, you no longer feel compelled to perform, manipulate, or overcompensate to secure his attention. You can show your true self without fear of rejection or disapproval. Emotional freedom emerges because the dynamic is grounded in integrity, consistency, and transparency rather than insecurity or neediness. That freedom enhances respect and deepens connection, creating a magnetic balance between autonomy and intimacy. Readiness is quiet but unmistakable. It is not measured by fleeting intensity, dramatic gestures, or bursts of attention. It is measured through repeated, deliberate action over time. Alignment between behavior and intention creates a pattern that is both reliable and compelling. This predictability allows the relationship to develop without unnecessary tension, providing a safe environment for mutual growth. Readiness manifests in everyday choices, consistent attention, and measured responses, demonstrating commitment without needing verbal affirmation at every turn. Ultimately, readiness signals clarity and intent. A man who is prepared to engage in a meaningful connection provides alignment, emotional availability, prioritization, and reliability consistently. You do not need to guess, chase, or interpret his actions because they speak for themselves. Trust, stability, and authenticity naturally follow, creating a dynamic in which emotional energy is invested with certainty, mutual respect is reinforced, and connection can evolve without confusion or doubt. Readiness transforms interaction into understanding, attention into trust, and presence into lasting engagement. Uncertainty in a man's behavior is rarely about you. It is about him. Mixed signals emerge when he is unsure of what he wants, when he fears commitment, or when he hesitates to align his actions with his feelings. Often, women internalize this inconsistency, believing that they caused it, misread it, or must overcompensate to fix it. They replay interactions endlessly, rationalize absences, and attempt to decode every gesture in hopes of gaining clarity. Yet no amount of interpretation on your part can generate certainty where it does not exist. Responsibility for clarity rests solely with him, And understanding this is essential to maintaining self-respect and emotional stability. When a man is uncertain, he communicates through inconsistency. He may appear attentive, affectionate, and engaged one day, only to withdraw, delay communication, or cancel plans the next. This oscillation creates anxiety, confusion, and overthinking because it forces you to guess his intentions. Mixed signals generate imbalance by making you the interpreter of his internal state rather than a participant in a transparent, aligned connection. Attempting to rationalize this inconsistency often leads to emotional exhaustion, over-investment, and compromise of your standards because you are trying to manufacture alignment through analysis instead of observing evidence. Certainty is fundamentally different from potential. When a man is certain, his actions reflect deliberate alignment between feelings and behavior. He does not test your patience, create emotional ambiguity, or rely on you to fill the gaps of his indecision. Certainty manifests in consistent attention, reliability, follow through on promises, and prioritization of connection. When behavior aligns with words, trust naturally emerges, and you no longer have to overanalyze, rationalize, or hope that things will improve. Stability replaces anxiety, and engagement becomes a choice founded on evidence rather than speculation. Uncertainty often stems from internal hesitation, fear of vulnerability, unresolved past experiences, self-doubt about readiness, or lack of clarity about priorities. Understanding these underlying factors can foster empathy, but empathy should not be mistaken for tolerance. You can recognize that a man may be struggling internally without accepting the consequences as indecision. Emotional labor, decoding signals, rationalizing behavior, and managing anxiety is not your responsibility. Understanding the source of uncertainty empowers you to observe patterns objectively and respond according to your standards rather than being trapped in hope or speculation. Repeated inconsistency is instructive. When his attention fluctuates, plans are canceled, or promises go unfulfilled, you are being shown his current capacity for alignment. Patterns of behavior are evidence, not punishment. They indicate whether his intentions are genuine and whether he is capable of sustaining the connection you deserve. Recognizing patterns allows you to make informed decisions to continue investing when alignment is present and to disengage when it is absent. Hope for change cannot replace observable evidence. Emotional energy should be invested in reliability, not potential. Tolerance of inconsistency often masquerades as patience, but they are not the same. Patience allows space for consistent behavior to emerge when evidence supports it. Tolerance allows indefinite ambiguity, normalizing behavior that fails to meet standards and eroding self-respect. Translating mixed signals into hopeful narratives often prolongs engagement with uncertainty, creating emotional debt while reinforcing patterns of indecision in him. Observing behavior without rationalizing it preserves energy, maintains standards, and restores clarity. Boundaries are the mechanism through which this clarity is enforced. Boundaries communicate non-negotiable standards without drama. They create accountability, showing that your time, emotional energy, and presence are not automatically available. Boundaries protect you from over-investing in ambiguity and reinforce the expectation that alignment, transparency, and consistency are required for meaningful connection. A man who respects your boundaries demonstrates readiness and certainty. A man who disregards them reveals continued hesitation or indecision. Boundaries transform observation into action without compromising empathy or compassion. Trust and respect emerge from consistency. Words alone cannot generate trust. Alignment between words and actions does. A man who repeatedly demonstrates reliability earns your confidence because his intentions are verifiable. Mixed signals, on the other hand, erode trust because they obscure reality, create doubt, and compel emotional labor. Recognizing that responsibility for clarity lies with him allows you to stop translating ambiguity and start evaluating the connection objectively. Self-respect and discernment replace hope as the guide for engagement. Ultimately, mixed signals are a reflection of him, not you. They reveal hesitation, fear, or indecision, but they do not indicate lack of value, attractiveness, or worthiness on your part. Understanding this truth allows you to disengage from speculation and make decisions rooted in evidence, alignment, and self-respect. Emotional labor belongs to the person generating uncertainty, and recognizing this restores power, preserves energy, and reinforces standards. Clarity, accountability, and consistency are non-negotiable. You invest only where alignment exists. Uncertainty cannot be rationalized into stability. This distinction is the difference between compromise and empowerment, hope and clarity, indecision and intentional connection. Stopping the translation of confusion is one of the most powerful steps you can take in any relationship. When a man sends mixed signals, your natural instinct may be to interpret, rationalize, and overthink every action and reaction, believing that understanding him will bring clarity. You analyze delayed messages, inconsistent attention, or withdrawn affection, trying to decode motives, intentions, or emotions. You attempt to construct a narrative, explains behavior, often at the cost of your own peace and emotional stability, but no amount of reasoning can generate certainty in someone who has not committed to clarity. Mixed signals are data, not puzzles for your mind to solve, and attempting to translate them only drains your energy and compromises your standards. The act of translating ambiguity often comes from fear of loss, fear of being alone, or fear of confrontation with reality. To avoid discomfort, you rationalize behavior, convincing yourself that distance, silence, or inconsistency is temporary or circumstantial. You hope that insight into motives will reduce anxiety, but hope does not replace alignment. Clarity is not invented through imagination. It is demonstrated through actions that consistently match words and intentions. When you stop translating confusion, you allow reality to speak for itself, and you stop giving power to uncertainty. Recognizing patterns rather than isolated events is essential. A single delayed response or a one-time withdrawal might be circumstantial, but repeated inconsistency creates a pattern that reveals intent and capacity. Patterns allow you to observe whether alignment exists and whether effort is consistent. You no longer rely on speculative interpretation or hope for potential to dictate your emotional investment. By observing evidence rather than inventing explanations, you gain the ability to respond from clarity instead of fear or desire. Emotional energy is preserved and self-respect remains intact. Emotional intuition is a critical guide in this process. Your nervous system detects instability before your conscious mind does. Anxiety, unease, or discomfort are signals that behavior is misaligned with your needs. Translating confusion often overrides these instincts, replacing perception with hope or rationalization. By honoring your internal cues, you use your intuition as a tool for assessment rather than a trigger for over-analysis. Trusting these signals prevents you from over-investing in uncertainty and allows you to maintain composure while evaluating the connection objectively. Boundaries are the natural outcome of refusing to translate ambiguity. They protect your emotional well-being while communicating your standards clearly. When repeated patterns of inconsistency appear, boundaries enforce accountability without drama. You do not chase explanations, overcompensate for absence, or tolerate disrespect. Boundaries create structure and clarity, ensuring that your attention and energy are given where alignment exists and preserved where it does not. Calm, consistent enforcement of boundaries is a demonstration of self-respect and a method of reducing emotional labor in relationships. Patience is different from tolerance, and distinguishing the two is crucial. Patience allows space for consistency to emerge when evidence exists, but tolerance extends uncertainty indefinitely, normalizing behavior that does not meet your standards. Translating confusion often blurs this line, keeping you engaged in hope and speculation instead of responding to observable reality. By stopping the translation of ambiguity, you preserve energy, reinforce standards, and prevent emotional exhaustion. You respond to evidence rather than wishful thinking. Understanding the principle of responsibility is fundamental. Mixed signals are a reflection of his uncertainty, hesitation, or internal conflict, not a reflection of your value or worth. You are not responsible for manufacturing clarity, decoding his motives, or stabilizing his inconsistency. Your responsibility lies in observing alignment, protecting your emotional energy, and enforcing your boundaries. By maintaining this perspective, you reclaim authority over your emotional state and prevent hope or overanalysis from eroding self-respect. Clarity, transparency, and consistency are non-negotiable foundations for meaningful connection. Words alone do not create trust. Actions aligned with intentions do. When you stop translating confusion, you shift the power back to where it belongs. On the person whose behavior is inconsistent, you allow patterns to speak for themselves, instincts to guide decisions, and boundaries to enforce standards. Emotional labor belongs to the creator of uncertainty, and recognizing this restores balance, preserves energy, and reinforces self-worth. Ultimately, stopping the translation of confusion is an act of empowerment. It allows you to engage with reality rather than speculation, to invest only where alignment exists, and to maintain clarity in your standards and boundaries. Mixed signals may reveal internal struggle or hesitation, but they do not dictate your emotional state. By observing patterns, trusting instincts, and refusing to rationalize uncertainty, you reclaim control, protect your energy, and establish relationships based on alignment, accountability, and respect. Insight becomes power, awareness becomes authority, and self-respect becomes the foundation upon which meaningful, intentional connection can be built.